Good to see you again. This is Arirang News, live from our studio in Seoul. I'm Laah Hyun-kyung. We begin at the National Assembly, where rival party lawmakers are wrangling over whether to confirm Prime Minister nominee Lee Wan-koo. Now, despite the objections of the opposition, the ruling party unilaterally confirmed the nominee at the committee level. Now, the question is, will he get the vote of the full assembly today? Our Park Ji-won has the latest.
It's the first major clash between the rival camps since the election of the main opposition party's new chairman, Moon Jae-in, with lawmakers from the rival New Politics Alliance for Democracy Party boycotting the meeting. The National Assembly's confirmation hearing committee approved the Prime Minister nominee this Thursday afternoon, with lawmakers from the ruling Saenuri Party voting to move the vote onto the full assembly. Lawmakers from the rival party boycotted the meeting in protest against what they said were the ruling Conservative Party's attempts to unilaterally press ahead with the confirmation vote. Opposition party floor leader Woo Yoon-gun had said earlier in the day that the nominee had fallen short of people's expectations due to allegations surrounding his past, and he vowed the party would protest to the ruling party's actions. Opposition lawmakers are now boycotting the assembly session that was scheduled to start this afternoon, considering that the ruling Saenuri Party has a strong majority of 158 in the 295-member assembly. If the ruling party wishes to go ahead with the vote, it can proceed with the session on its own this afternoon. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
And on to the latest on the so-called outrage scandal. The sentencing hearing for former VP of Korean Air Cho Yeon-ah is underway in Seoul. Prosecutors are demanding 3 years in prison. All eyes are on whether Cho will face jail time without probation. Kim Hyun-bin reports.
A Seoul District Court will announce its verdict Thursday on whether Cho Yeon-ah, the former vice president of Korean Air, is guilty of charges ranging from violating aviation safety regulations to pressuring cabin crew to lie to investigators. Earlier this month, prosecutors asked the court to sentence Cho to 3 years in prison for her actions during the so-called nut rage incident. The prosecution team pointed out that Cho has shown no sign of genuine remorse for her actions. The former executive has continued to blame the crew for her decision to order a senior crew member to deplane in New York last December, after they did not follow the proper procedure for serving nuts to passengers in first class. The Korean public has been fixated with this case since the beginning. Many see it as the latest example of misbehavior by a member of a conglomerate or so-called chaebol family, who believe with their power and influence that they can act and do as they please. In the past, local courts have gone relatively easy on chaebol leaders convicted of crimes by granting them pardons or handing down lenient punishments. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
Washington's announcement that it's lifting its embargo on Cuba means more than words to businesses around the world, and with business opportunities widening on the trade front, the Korean government is also gearing up to prepare domestic exporters to take advantage of the chance. Now, Song Ji-sun has this next report.
From accessories and telecom devices to electronics and autos, those are some of the items Korean exporters could soon be sending over to Cuba, a market that is soon to be given a strong boost after the U.S. announced its plan to lift its decades-old embargo. An estimate by the Korea Trade Investment Promotion Agency suggests that foreign direct investment to Cuba will jump 17 times from the current $1 billion to $17 billion when the U.S. sanctions are completely removed. Seoul's outbound shipments to Havana stood at $56 million last year, while imports stood at $12 million. Kutra says Korean companies could use the Cuban market as a bridge to enter Central and South America, but cautions they should also be aware of the rigid government regulations there, as well as a lack of liquidity among prospective partner companies in the island nation. To hedge against the risks, Seoul is taking practical steps to help exporters explore the new business opportunities. The Korea Trade Insurance Corporation on Monday signed an MOU with Cuba's central bank to provide $70 million in trade insurance to Korean companies seeking to export their products. In its bid to re-establish diplomatic ties with Cuba after more than 5 decades, Seoul is also offering humanitarian aid to Havana, engaging in a development program for the country for the first time. Earlier this week, Seoul's foreign ministry signed an MOU with the UN World Food Program for a $3 million project aimed at improving food production output and reducing poverty in Cuba by 2017. 송지선, Arirang News.
Korea's inflation rate dropped below the average for G7 nations last year for the first time in 8 years. Data from the OECD on Thursday says Korea's inflation rate was 1.3% last year, falling below the 7 major economies' average of 1.6%. Now, this comes at a time when some experts are voicing concerns that Korea's economy may be heading into a deflationary phase. Korea's inflation rate has fallen below the G7 average just twice in the past, back in 1999 after the country's bailout from the Asian financial crisis, and again in 2006. Now, the group of 7 countries includes the U.S., France, the UK, and Japan, countries that have entered a period of slow growth and low inflation as their consumer prices have stabilized. Moody's Investors Service said that lower oil prices will not spur global economic growth, going against what has seemed like the conventional wisdom in certain circles these days, saying that tumbling oil prices will not significantly boost global growth in the next 2 years. The company says the economies of the Eurozone, China, Brazil, and Japan will act as the biggest drag on the global economy. It did say, however, that lower oil prices will benefit the U.S. economy, as the favorable economic environment there will encourage consumer and corporate spending. The ratings agency kept its GDP growth outlook for the G20 countries at a little below 3% for 2015 and 2016, unchanged from last year's forecast. Now, Moody's global outlook is based on predictions that Brent oil prices will be at $55 a barrel this year and $65 on average next year. For years, Korean chip makers have stayed among the top 5 in the global DRAM market. But for the first time last year, their combined market share topped 70%, thanks largely to technological advances and steady demand. Our Kim Ji-yeon has this story.
Korean memory chip makers dominated the global DRAM market with a share of more than 70% during the September to December period of last year. The combined market share of Korean companies during the period is the highest recorded, of 0.7% from the previous quarter. Tech giant Samsung Electronics held more than 41% of the market, while SK hynix took up a near 28%. They were closely followed by U.S. chip maker Micron Group. Technological advances were key to the leading performances, says market tracker DRAM Exchange. Samsung Electronics produces smaller products than its rivals. Its 20 and 23 nanometer chips are 1/50th the width of a human hair. Also, SK hynix improved the manufacturing process for its 25 nanometer chips by reducing the number of defective products. Their high performance is expected to continue this year as well on the back of steady chip prices. The global market for DRAM memory chips is expected to increase 13% from last year to nearly $53 billion. As of Thursday morning, prices for DDR2 were traded at around $1.24, down 0.3% from the previous day. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Korea's Daum Kakao has reported impressive fourth-quarter profits. The local IT giant says its profits for the final 3 months of last year were up more than 70% to nearly $60 million, largely driven by strong advertising sales. The strong earnings come after the merger of Daum and Kakao Corporation last October. Since the merger, the company has rolled out mobile money transaction services and taxi hailing application on top of its mobile messaging service. Now, South Korea's defense budget was the 10th largest in 2014 at $34.4 billion, coming in just behind Germany with roughly 44 billion. Now that's according to an annual report released by the UK-based International Institute for Strategic Studies. The US topped the list with $643 trillion, followed by China and Saudi Arabia. North Korea did not make it onto the list, but the institute says Pyongyang has made great strides in enhancing its missile program and weapons of mass destruction. It added that following the 2008 financial crisis, NATO and European countries significantly reduced their forces, while Asian countries are investing more in defense. And more people in Korea are reporting child abuse, and more reported cases are being brought to justice. Data submitted to a ruling party lawmaker by the Welfare Ministry on Thursday shows that nearly 18,000 cases of child abuse were reported last year, of which roughly 9,800 cases were determined as child abuse and flagged for monitoring. That's about a 44% increase from the number in 2013. Experts attribute the increase to a special law that went into effect last September that strengthens punishment for child abuse. They added that more people have become aware of what constitutes child abuse from increased media coverage and public attention on the issue.
Bringing you the fresh updates from stories breaking in Korea and abroad. We give you a bigger and better picture of the world. Join Laah Hyun-kyung live from Seoul. Every weekday, only on Arirang.
With threats from Islamic State militants not showing any signs of dwindling, U.S. President Barack Obama has taken a big step forward. Determined to fight the extremist group wherever they exist, the American president asked Congress to authorize military action against them. With more, here's our Kim Min-ji.
U.S. President Barack Obama has made a formal request to Congress to authorize military force against a terrorist group that calls itself Islamic State.
This resolution reflects our core objective to destroy ISIL. It supports the comprehensive strategy that we've been pursuing with our allies and our partners.
In a televised speech, Obama noted the military campaign is a difficult mission, but said the U.S. is on the front foot and IS is going to lose. The request does not call for the deployment of ground troops, although a separate letter to Congress did state that it will be limited to rescue operations or the use of special operations forces to take military action against the extremist group's leadership. While there's general support for the plan, the Republicans want stronger measures, and some Democrats say the resolution goes too far. If the request is approved, it would authorize a military campaign for 3 years without geographical restrictions. It would also be the first war authorization since then-President George W. Bush sought authority to wage war in Iraq in 2002. The U.S. has conducted airstrikes against IS targets in Iraq and Syria since August last year, leading a coalition of Western and Arab nations. Obama said that although existing statutes provide him with the authority to take these actions, Congress backing would show the world that the U.S. is united in its resolve to crush IS. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Western governments have begun closing their embassies in Yemen, citing deepening security concerns amid a power vacuum in the country. On Wednesday, thousands of Yemenis filled the streets of the capital and other cities, demanding that the country's leaders be reinstated and rejecting the militia's constitutional declaration that dissolved parliament. Yemen's president and prime minister had quit last month amid pressure from the Houthi rebels who overran Sana's and seized key government buildings, including the presidential palace. Now, hours before the protests, the U.S. and Britain both pulled their last diplomats from Sana's as they urged their nationals to leave the country immediately. France, Germany, and Italy are expected to follow suit. The tone and words Japan's Prime Minister Shinzo Abe will use in his upcoming statement marking the 70th anniversary of the end of World War II has incited conflict in Japan. For more, here's our Connie Kim.
A debate is raging in Japan's parliament over a statement to be delivered by Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe in August to mark the 70th anniversary of the end of World War II. Last month, Abe indicated he will not use certain terms such as colonial rule and aggression, deep remorse, or heartfelt apology, which were included in Tokyo's 1995 statement by then Prime Minister Domichi Murayama. The country's main opposition Democratic Party has labeled Abe's remarks intolerable and demanded the content of his statement be shared with and discussed in parliament, not just within the confines of Abe's cabinet.
Don't you think it's necessary to discuss the contents of the statement with parliament for the sake of national consent?
It's hard to pass a resolution in parliament. We'll announce a statement under our cabinet.
And in a rare move, the new Komeito Party, part of Abe's ruling coalition, has voiced its concerns, saying the past statements were announced after consultation with lawmakers.
The statement is accepted at home and abroad as the basic position of Japan. It's common sense that a consensus is reached within the coalition parties.
Adding to the conflict and confusion, the chairman of Abe's ruling Liberal Democratic Party's General Council, Toshihiro Nikai, said it's only sensible that the cabinet coordinate the upcoming statement with different parties. The international community has been calling on Japan to address its historic past wrongdoings and issue a sincere apology. And with Japanese lawmakers calling for Abe to strike a forgiving tone, analysts say the Japanese leader is under growing pressure to make a heartfelt apology for Japan's past wrongdoings. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
A court in Italy has handed down a guilty verdict and a 16-year jail sentence to the runaway captain of the doomed cruise liner, the Costa Concordia. It took the panel of 3 judges just about 5 hours to reach that guilty verdict, capping a 19-month trial and handing some sort of resolution to the family members of the 32 people lost off the coast of Giglio. Francesco Schettino was at the helm in 2012 when the Costa Concordia moved too close to the shore and crashed into rocks off the Tuscan island. He fled the giant ship before his passenger and crew of 4,200 people were rescued. Schettino and his defense team had requested a plea bargain, which was denied. They are expected to appeal the verdict. Now, eating healthy is something most of us try to do, but it turns out that food we once thought was bad for us might not be that bad after all. A government advisory panel in the U.S. says, contrary to past recommendations, we shouldn't worry about having too much cholesterol in our diets. Our Kwon So-ah has this story.
Before, when you reached out for food high in cholesterol like eggs or shrimps, you might have thought twice, especially if you're an older adult. But now researchers in the U.S. say you might be all right to tuck into your heart's content after all. At least that's what an influential nutrition advisory panel in the U.S. says, as it scrapped a warning against LDL cholesterol, often dubbed as the bad cholesterol, from its nutrition guidelines. In a first in 40 years, the Dietary Guidelines Advisory Committee's decision also runs counter to its last reform made 5 years ago, when it advised people to take in less than 300 milligrams of cholesterol a day, which is equivalent to the amount found in an egg. The instructional changes come as more nutritionists say years of research show that high cholesterol food does not greatly influence the health of ordinary adults. They believe that consuming these foods doesn't significantly raise levels of cholesterol in the blood or increase the risk of heart disease. Having too many foods high in saturated fats like butter and red meat, they say, is much more dangerous. The guidelines also warns patients with diabetes to still be cautious when eating high cholesterol foods. The committee plans to send its final draft to the government's Health and Agriculture Department in order to issue its 2015 dietary guidelines for the public. While some experts say cholesterol should have been dropped off the warning list years ago, others remain skeptical and still stand by previous research. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
And on the cultural front, the film Once captured the hearts of millions and the musical followed the trend. Now it's been on stage in Korea. Our Im Yun-hee has a special behind-the-scenes look for us. Take a look.
Guy meets girl, quite literally.
the Irish street performer frequents a local pub to play his guitar. And just when he thinks he's through with music, a young woman who goes by the name Girl enters his life. The multiple award-winning musical Once has been staged around the world with over 1,000 performances on Broadway alone. And while live music is nothing new, the actors here take the musicality of the whole affair to a new level.
There are 12 actors and over 16 different instruments. So other than the main actors, everyone plays 3 to 4 instruments. And of course, mistakes and accidents are inevitable. For example, a guitar string can pop while on stage, but we have a system to cover for that, which involves constant communication between us and the actors. So the team catches each other's mistakes and is able to cover for them on stage.
It's a tough gig, singing and dancing on stage. So these actors know a good warm-up is key to a strong start. Anything to get their bodies going. But this isn't your run-of-the-mill musical. Of course, they're singing and dancing, but this is Once, which means doing all of the above, plus playing live music. This is also the first translated adaptation, so expectations are high. But the Korean Once team is willing to practice, especially since there's no musical conductor on stage to give them the cue. Cooperation between each and every musical actor is absolutely essential. That way, when it comes to curtain call, the show can go on.
The biggest difference between this and other musicals is that we're all playing instruments live throughout the show, so we're responsible for the music as well.
And since there's no director on stage to give us a cue, we designate a leader amongst us, and that person will give us a cue. They may use their eyes to signal, or they may make some big dramatic motion for us to pick up on. And through this, we can follow their lead and play the song together.
이런 식으로는 더는 곤란해 더는 의미가 없어 가라앉는 날 붙잡아줘 더 늦기 전에.
Are they musicians, actors, or dancers? It's hard to put these characters into one category. But that's just what you can expect from this unique love story musical, as this is something you only come across once in a lifetime. Kim Yoon-hee, Arirang News.
Welcome back. I'm Michelle Park here with the latest weather forecast. Unlike yesterday, we have good visibility today due to the cold air that came down from north, which is also why we have this chill in the air. Although our highs are above 0 degrees Celsius, don't expect them to feel that way because it feels more like it's at freezing. Generally, it's looking clear in most parts of the country due to the influence of high pressure front, that is, except for the coastal areas in Jeollado provinces where it'll be cloudy and snow is also expected later today. Now, the cold air will be sticking around until tomorrow, pulling down the mercury down below average. But the mild temperatures will come back this weekend, along with a bout of rain nationwide on Sunday until Monday. Now, let's have a look at the readings for today. So, we'll be lingering at 4 this afternoon, while the southern regions such as Gwangju and Busan will top to 5 and 9. And to other regions, Jeju Island gets up to 9 as well. Dokdo hits down to 3, while Mangyang is colder at -5 degrees. That's all from me at this hour, and here's a look at the weather conditions around the world.
Now we have more updates coming in on the nomination on the Prime Minister nominee Lee Wan-koo's confirmation. The rival parties have agreed to vote on his nomination, not today, but on the 16th of this month, which will be next Monday. And we will have more on this developing story on our later newscast. Now that brings us to the end of this edition of our newscast. I'm Laah Hyun-kyung in Seoul. I'll be back with all of that and more at 6 p.m. Korea time.